Growing up, I was always very close to my mom. She was my rock, my safe place, and my best friend wrapped into one. After my father passed away, it was like we became each other's whole world. I remember the quiet, comforting dinners we'd share at the small kitchen table, where we'd light a single candle and talk about everything or nothing at all, just enjoying each other's presence. Our late-night talks became a ritual, with her lying on one end of the couch and me on the other, wrapped in the same blanket. We'd talk in whispers, as though the silence around us could shatter if we spoke too loud, sharing dreams, worries, and even the funny stories that only we could understand. Those moments, those little rituals, became the threads that wove together our lives. They made me feel grounded, safe, like nothing could ever intrude on our little world. But when Alex entered our lives, everything changed. At first, it was little things, small shifts that didn't seem important, like the way she laughed a bit louder when he was around or the new dishes she'd make for him that I'd never seen her cook for us. I noticed how she began to drift off to her room earlier, leaving our late-night talks behind. The cozy dinners grew quieter as we adjusted to another presence, someone who didn't yet understand the nuances of our small, precious world. I could see her eyes light up in a way they hadn't in years, a way that was both beautiful and heartbreaking because it reminded me that our life, our bond, was no longer just ours. It felt like someone had nudged open a door I thought was closed forever, letting a draft in, changing the way everything felt in a way I couldn't yet understand. My mom had met Alex at a charity gala, a rare night out for her, dressed in one of her favorite dresses, the soft lavender one she kept at the back of her closet for special occasions. I remember that evening well. She came home late, a soft, dreamy look in her eyes as she told me about him over dinner the next night. Her cheeks glowed with a warmth I hadn't seen in years, her voice light and almost bashful as she recounted their conversation. "He's an architect," she'd said, as if the word itself held a quiet magic. "Alex Ellis. Gentle, thoughtful, but a little reserved. There's something very steady about him." She smiled, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her teacup. For the first time since Dad passed, I saw a spark in her eyes, a fragile, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone who could fill the lonely spaces in her life. When she told me they were getting married, I swallowed my own mixed feelings, pushing aside the slight pang of jealousy that tugged at me. I wanted to be happy for her, to see her joy outweigh the shadows she'd carried for so long. After years of watching her navigate life on her own, her happiness was a gift, one I didn't want to tarnish with my own fears. Still, it stung a little, realizing that our small, cozy world was about to expand. I would have to share her, this time with someone who, though kind, was still a stranger to me. As I stood by her side at the wedding, watching her slip her hand into his with a shy smile, I reminded myself that this was her chance to find peace again, even if it meant I'd have to adjust, too. Seeing her laugh freely with Alex, something within me softened. I just wanted her to be happy, even if it meant letting go of the life we'd known. After they married, I found myself wrestling with the strange new reality of our household. Alex was polite, always quick with a kind word or offer of help, and he went out of his way to respect my space, as if he, too, was unsure of his place. But despite his efforts, I couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that he was an outsider in my world, like an extra piece in a familiar puzzle that didn't quite fit. Every gesture, every conversation felt rehearsed, as though we were both trying too hard to bridge a gap neither of us fully understood. I made an effort to warm up to him, knowing he was doing his best to make our lives more comfortable. He brought home little surprises for my mom and me, cooked meals on weekends, and even fixed things around the house that had been broken for months. Yet, as much as I appreciated these gestures, there was always a barrier, a kind of invisible wall that kept us from really connecting. When he'd walk into a room, I'd sometimes feel the air shift, as if the comfortable silence I was so used to with my mom became strained with his presence. Conversations were polite but hollow, like we were both skimming the surface of something much deeper. Even the way he'd call me kiddo felt foreign, an awkward attempt at familiarity that only highlighted the distance between us. There was a weight to it all, something unspoken that hung in the background, invisible yet impossible to ignore, as if we both knew we were playing parts in a story that wasn't quite ours. Then one winter night, everything changed. It was one of those cold, still Saturday evenings when the world outside seemed as though it was wrapped in a quiet, relentless chill. The house felt too big, too empty without Mom's warm presence and easy laughter echoing through the rooms. She was out of town for a weekend conference, leaving Alex and me to share a silence that felt heavier with each passing hour. The familiar creaks of the old house, usually comforting, seemed louder and more insistent in the solitude. I'd spent most of the day tucked away in my room, trying to escape into the pages of an old novel. I wasn't really reading, though. I kept skimming over words, my mind somewhere far from the story. I had wrapped myself in my thickest blanket, its softness a small comfort against the biting chill that seeped through the windows. The room was dimly lit by my bedside lamp, casting a warm but muted glow over the cluttered surfaces, half-finished mugs of tea, a notebook with unfinished thoughts, a framed photo of Mom and me from last summer. The air was heavy with my tangled thoughts, a mix of restlessness and unease I couldn't quite place. And just as I shifted to stretch my legs, breaking the stillness, a soft knock sounded at my door. I froze, my heart picking up slightly, unsure of what to expect. The sound was gentle, almost hesitant, as if Alex wasn't sure if he should be interrupting my solitude. "Hey." Alex's voice was soft, almost hesitant, but there was something layered in his tone that I couldn't quite read, something different. He paused in the doorway, his hand resting on the frame as if anchoring himself there. "I thought I'd check on you. Your mom mentioned you'd been feeling a bit down lately." A small pang of surprise mixed with uncertainty fluttered in my chest. I glanced at the closed door, then back at him, caught between a familiar feeling of privacy and a strange curiosity.
"Come in."
Alex stepped in, and I noticed the small, cautious smile playing on his face, a peace-offering smile that was gentle but unsure. In his hand was a steaming mug of hot chocolate, tendrils of warmth rising from it in gentle curls. He handed it to me, his fingers brushing mine briefly, the warmth of the mug sinking into my palms. He then eased himself onto the edge of my bed, perching as if ready to pull back at the first sign of discomfort. I took a sip, the rich, bittersweet taste spreading through me, the warmth a stark contrast to the lingering chill in the room. And yet, a part of me couldn't let go of the underlying tension, the sense that I was holding something much more complex than a simple cup of cocoa. "Thanks for this," I murmured, my eyes focused on the swirling chocolate. My voice felt small, my gratitude tinged with an awkwardness I couldn't quite shake. It's been a while since I had hot chocolate." He chuckled, a quiet, testing laugh, the kind people use when they're stepping carefully into fragile territory. "Your mom told me it's what she'd make you after a tough day. I thought it might work for you too." We sat in silence for a few moments, a comfortable quiet laced with anticipation. I felt his gaze on me but kept my eyes lowered, noticing the way my hands wrapped around the warmth of the mug as though it could shield me. Then he asked, "Do you want to talk about anything? I know adjusting hasn't been easy." I looked up at him, caught off guard by the honesty in his expression, a sincerity I hadn't expected to see. His eyes, usually guarded, seemed softer, more open. It's hard to explain," I said slowly, each word feeling as if I had to climb over a wall I'd put up long ago. "I'm used to it being just my mom and me, you know?
Our own little world."
He nodded, leaning forward slightly, his gaze unwavering as he listened.
"I get that."
"I can only imagine what that bond must mean." "I didn't want to disrupt anything," he said, his voice quieter now, almost apologetic. "I only wanted to be part of your family, not take anything away from you." His words hung in the air, and I found myself staring down at the mug, my grip instinctively tightening. This was the side of him I hadn't expected to see, the side that felt my discomfort, my reservations, and respected them. "It's not your fault," I whispered, feeling a lump rise in my throat that I wasn't prepared for.
"I'm just not used to sharing her. It's strange, and harder than I thought it would be."
Our conversation meandered after that, flowing unexpectedly between my memories of my dad and his own stories. He opened up in a way I hadn't anticipated, each story peeling back layers I hadn't seen before. His own feelings of loss, his loneliness before meeting my mom, it was as if he was holding out parts of himself, parts one hadn't realized were there. Slowly, piece by piece, I felt some of the resentment I'd carried begin to dissolve, replaced by an unexpected kinship. In that quiet space, he was no longer just my mom's new husband, the man I had to tolerate. He was someone who had faced his own battles, who had carried his own pain. And for the first time, I realized that beneath his calm, collected exterior was someone as vulnerable as I was, someone who, like me, was just trying to find his place. One evening, something happened that left a lingering chill I couldn't shake, a feeling that settled in the pit of my stomach like a stone. My mom was working a late shift, so it was just Alex and me at home. We'd had dinner, a quiet meal of leftovers, and afterward, I'd curled up on the living room couch, flipping through streaming options until I landed on an old, familiar movie. Alex, meanwhile, had busied himself in the kitchen, tapping away at his laptop, the quiet sounds of his work creating a comfortable background. The house was filled with that cozy evening silence, where even the smallest sound seemed to amplify. I was starting to relax, wrapped in the soft glow of the TV, my legs tucked under blanket, when I heard the creak of the kitchen chair and his footsteps approaching. Alex joined me on the couch, settling in at the other end, and I reminded myself it was just two people sharing a quiet night. At first, it was normal, even nice, in an almost familial way. He made a few casual remarks about the movie, and I nodded, focused on the screen, not thinking much of it. But soon, his comments took on an odd edge, a little too personal, almost as if he was seeing something in me that made me uncomfortable. He complimented me, his words lingering a bit too long, and I noticed his eyes held a gaze that seemed different. Not just casual or friendly, more like he was observing me closely, with an intensity that made my skin prickle. It wasn't a simple glance, it was as if he was studying me, watching for a reaction I wasn't sure I wanted to give. He shifted, his arm moving closer until his hand rested on the back of the couch behind me. I could feel the warmth of his presence just inches away, close enough that I was aware of every slight movement he made. My muscles tensed involuntarily, and I forced a small, strained smile, hoping it might dissolve the tension creeping into the air between us. I told myself maybe it was just a friendly gesture, an unconscious move he didn't mean anything by. But the unease only grew, like a shadow stretching across the room, suffocating the comfort I'd felt just minutes ago. A voice in my mind screamed to trust my instincts, to recognize that familiar, sinking feeling that something was wrong. Yet another part of me hesitated, caught in a battle between doubt and self-assurance, not wanting to leap to conclusions. I wanted to say something, to break the uncomfortable silence or shift the mood back to something lighter, but my words caught in my throat, replaced by the pounding of my heart echoing in my ears. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I forced a casual smile and muttered something about needing to grab something from my room. Standing up, I felt a rush of relief, like I'd escaped from an invisible grip. I hurried down the hall, my hands trembling as I reached for my bedroom door, closing it behind me as if I was shutting out the whole world. Once inside, I pressed my back against the door, breathing deeply, my heart still racing as the unsettling encounter replayed in my mind. I stayed there, huddled on my bed, refusing to leave my room until I heard the familiar sound of my mom's car pulling into the driveway. After that night, things became tense again. The boundaries that had once been clear between us felt blurred. I found myself replaying our conversation and the look he'd given me, wondering if I'd imagined it. I wanted to believe that it was just an innocent moment, a mistake on his part, but something in me felt changed, like an invisible line had been crossed. Days passed, and we avoided each other as much as possible. But eventually, we found ourselves alone again, this time in the kitchen as I prepped dinner. Alex stood by, offering help in a quiet, restrained way. The tension was palpable, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. About the other night, I began, feeling my cheeks flush. I think you crossed a line. He looked at me, his eyes shadowed by regret. You're right. I'm sorry, Jade. I never wanted to make you uncomfortable. It was a moment of weakness. To this day, I'm not sure if he meant anything by it or if I have trust issues. But it definitely changed the way I saw him. And I've always wondered, is he truly sorry, or was I just reading too much into it?